Hey everyone, before we start the video, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to everyone who's subscribed or watched any of my videos. Just thank you for getting me to 100 subs. I mean, it's a pretty small milestone, but it's really incredible that in posting around like 18 videos, I've gotten this much subscribers in I think like 8 months, which might not seem that great, but on my previous channel I got around 100 in about 5 years, so I'm really glad that we're growing. Anyhow, if you didn't notice, I have a really sore throat right now. I'm not feeling great, so I was trying to narrate as many of these stories as possible before my sickness caught up with me, but yeah, anyhow, let's start the video then. Okay, so this encounter happened back in 2009. I was 17 years old and in year 11 at high school. It was a weeknight and I had just left my then boyfriend's house, probably around 6 p.m., to catch the train home. I caught buses and trains everywhere, so I had the pleasure of bumping into a lot of quirky people quite often, but this night was much different. I was waiting at the train station. It was still somewhat light out, and I was the only person on the platform at that point, because around that time of day was still considered peak hour. I usually didn't have to wait long for my train, but on this fateful day, it had been delayed. I was sitting halfway down the platform on a bench, and about 10 to 15 meters away, a man joined me in waiting for the train. He had a phone to his ear and was quietly talking to somebody. Obviously, I thought nothing of it. A few minutes passed, and then I noticed the man had hung up his phone and was slowly edging closer to where I was sitting, shooting me quick glances. Now, I suffer from fairly terrible anxiety, so I immediately started feeling a little nervous. I watched his quick movements out of the corner of my eye. He's a tall, muscular-looking man, probably in his mid to late 20s. Sure enough, he's eventually made his way over to my bench, but he doesn't sit down. After a few minutes of silence, he says,
"Hey."
And I look over at him, pretending that I didn't just watch him slowly walk over to me, and I say hi back.
"What are you doing tonight?"
He asks, barely making eye contact with me. I'm just going home. He's silent for a while. I was praying he'd just walk away, but then, out of nowhere, he begins telling me how sexy I look. Now, I remember at the time not getting scared at how abrupt and inappropriate his comment was, but I laughed instead. I was tired, wearing no makeup, hair in a messy-ass bun, and I was wearing one of my boyfriend's giant jumpers. I looked like a big, ugly ball, and I seriously thought this guy was just kidding around. But he looked unimpressed, almost angry, when I laughed. Feeling uncomfortable again, I just murmured, "Thanks," and kept my head down, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. He then asked me how old I am. I tell him that I'm 17, underaged, mind you, but that definitely didn't deter him. "You should come with me," he says, and I immediately begin to panic all over again. But because back then I was way too polite and never wanted to hurt anyone's feelings, instead of telling this guy to leave me the fuck alone, I started making shitty excuses as to why I needed to get home as soon as possible. Well, I have family coming over for dinner, or I have so much homework tonight, or I'm just not feeling very well right now. He looks annoyed and ignores everything I've just said and tells me there's a party tonight and that he wants to take me. Without even thinking, I blurt out, "What the hell? You don't even know my name." He suddenly sits down next to me, his face serious. He tells me his car is in the parking lot about 100 meters away and we should just go now.
"It'll be fun. There's drinks and music, and I'll buy you some new clothes before we go anywhere."
By this point, my heart is beating out of my chest, and I just want him to leave. Other people are arriving at the station now, and I'm looking around at them desperately, trying to get someone's attention because I'm too scared to get up and move. I don't want him to see that I'm scared, though, so I continue to smile, saying, "I'm really sorry, but I have a boyfriend, and I gotta get home." "Oh, you'll forget about him." Then I see it. the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. My train was approaching the station. I was so close to getting away from this guy, but of course he saw it too. I begin to gather my things, and I stand up, and he grabbed my arm, pulling me onto the sea again.
Let's just go for a little drive.
I got to my feet again, and I tried pulling my arm away from him, but he held on. I thought to myself, surely people are watching this, right? Someone will come and help me at any moment now. But no one did. People could see me trying to get away from this man, but they were acting completely oblivious to it. The train rolled up to the platform, and people began to exit as I was trying to pull out of this guy's grasp. He suddenly let go, and without missing a beat, I hightailed it to the train carriage just before the door closed, breathing uncontrollably. People in the train are staring at me wide-eyed, but of course, no one asked if I was okay or needed help. I looked out the train window, and this guy is staring in the window at me, his phone back on his ear. As the train slowly pulls away from the station, he begins walking back to the platform, and I'm guessing towards his car. At the time, I was just freaked out that a strange man had been so physically forceful with me, but 7 years down track, I'm fully aware of how dangerous a situation like that could have been. I know he clearly wasn't waiting for the train, and I didn't want to know who he'd been talking on the phone with either. Ever since then, I swore to myself that if I ever saw somebody visibly uncomfortable or scared in public, I wouldn't turn a blind eye like those people did to me. I've been lurking on this side of Reddit for 3.5 hours thinking I don't have a story to tell, but I have 2 stories, and here's one of them. It's long, but here's the story of when my cousin tried to kill me and my mom, twice in one day. About 7 years ago, I went to Ghana, which is in West Africa, with my mom. She's Ghanaian and I'm Black British, but we were visiting our homelands together. At the time I was 14, but my childhood was not an easy one. So I was, and still am, sharp as a bullet. My mom owns a small hotel business abroad. There's like 5 rooms. And she had hired her cousin, I think my distant cousin, to take care of business when we weren't around. She took him out of a village that had no electricity or gas, and he had been my caretaker of my mom's business for as long as I can remember at the time, whilst my mom and I were in London. Now, I know this sounds very nice of my mom, but she can be a ruthless woman. Honestly, she's the source of my greatest pain and my greatest love. But she can be a little brutish and cold, and she will never let anyone fuck with her. She's gone through some stuff in Ghana, and her journey to get to London illegally was quite the James Bond story, but anyways, onwards. We found out that he had been stealing money from her, so that was the purpose of our flight. We surprised him at the hotel by just turning up randomly. The next day, my mom sacked him, which means he would have to pack up his things and go back to a very poor mud hut in his village. Akwasi, my cousin's name, has a wife and 3 kids, all of whom are in poverty too. When this happened, I wasn't at the hotel. I was in a city center in Accra, in a very populated market with my mom's friend. However, for some reason, as I was walking around, a sudden sense of terror washed all over me. I am 21 years old now, and since I am a people person, talkative, social, etc., but I've also gone through some shit, honestly, I'm good at reading people, and I follow my gut because of these things. Anyway, I told my mom's friend that we should go back to the hotel. I was on autopilot when my body just started moving on its own, and suddenly I was sprinting back to the hotel, and he kept telling me to wait as we ran. When I got there, the woman staying at the hotel was standing outside crying, and she looked at me and hissed very low, "Run, or he'll kill you." Both me and my mom's friend are like, what the fuck? When I arrived, the back entrance to the small hotel was wide open. I bolted into the corridor and found my cousin standing outside a locked room with a machete and a passport screaming at the top of his lungs. I immediately hid behind the counter so he couldn't see me, and in my language he said,
I'll fucking cut you like a butcher with his meat. You and your daughter. This is my building now.
My mom's friend freezes up and then bolts out the door of the hotel. The way the hotel is set up, you can either enter the main gate or take a left to get to the small car park, or just come through the car park where you can see into the windows of some of the rooms. Because of the high rates of armed robbery in Ghana, like full-on guns, knives, and gangs bursting into your house, stealing your shit, and killing you in cold blood type thing, loads of houses have iron railings around their windows to prohibit entry, but it also prohibits exits. I ran back outside and dragged a chair from nearby, next to the window of the room that was locked, and my mom was crying behind the door, shaking. I've never seen her like that in my life. She saw me and she froze, and then vomited onto the floor. I mouthed to her that I'll come rescue her, and she shook her head and told me to run. Anyways, Akwasi, the crazy machete man, rounded the corner. I screamed and ran the other way, and he chased me, but there was distance between us. So I managed to crawl under the huge car gates and tell my neighbors. They kind of already knew though, because my mom's friend who took me to the market had already told them. They then went and called the chief for the area, and in about 3 minutes, over 10 huge fucking men are following me and my mom's friend to the hotel. My mom is really kind when she wants to be, and had helped these guys out by bailing them out of poverty. They disarmed my uncle and beat the shit out of him. I then found out that he had been holding my mom's passport in an attempt to stop her from leaving the country. Anyway, my mom comes out of the room and she's really shaken up. My adrenaline crashes when I see that she's in safe hands. I'm shaking really badly. We hold a group meeting about my cousin with the close neighborhood members in the hotel, but I sit outside because I'm too scared to sit indoors anywhere near my cousin. Then my mom calls me inside, but when I go in, Akwazi is absurdly nice to me. Anyways, I kind of ignore him because I'm still really scared. He makes me and my mom a mug of hot tea and chocolate as an apology for losing it earlier. The other neighborhood members are drinking some tea too. I glance at my mom, who is blowing the top of the tea because it's really hot. Then I stare into my mug, and for some reason, staring at that cup of hot chocolate made my blood run cold. I then asked my mom who made the tea, and she said it was Akwazi, but she agreed not to fire him due to his circumstances. At the time, I chided myself for being paranoid, but I'm so glad I followed my gut. So I refused to drink it. It's 2 p.m. and it's dry season in Ghana. It's so hot that it would be stupid to drink hot chocolate at this time. The drink looked fine, but something seems off. Its color is slightly gray, so I lean over to smell it, and it doesn't smell bad, but it smells chemically, like a strong mosquito repellent kind of smell. My mom can't smell it because she's been crying, so her nasal passage is all blocked up. She picks up the mug to have a sip, because my mom loves tea, and I tell her that mine smells weird. I give it to one of the elders of the neighborhood to smell, and they agree it smells quite sharp. She puts the cup back down before she can have a sip, and suddenly the cup's rim is black as fuck. When my mom asks Agwatsi what's in the cup, he doesn't even miss a beat. He doesn't even hesitate to tell her that it's loaded with rat poison. At this point, my whole body feels like molten lava. I have never and will never feel the kind of blinding hot rage in my life ever again. I remember launching myself at Agwazi, who was double my age. I remember digging my fingers into his eye sockets and sinking them in. I knew I could draw blood. I understand why people can be blinded by anger. When I came conscious of my actions, I was being hugged tightly by a tall, black, hulky man and hyperventilating like crazy. My stomach was scratched, and the bruise on the side of my face was huge. Anyways, Agwazi said he wanted to commit suicide an hour and a half later. So my mom hands him both cups of rat-poisoned beverages and tells him to down them both and do the world a favor. So crazy cousin from Accra, Ghana, let's not meet again or I'll rip the soul right out of your body, you low-life piece of shit. And in case you're wondering, no, he didn't drink the poison. He chickened out in the end. He's still alive and kicking. From 2006 to 2008, I was a student at university in England studying paramedic science. This course was a 2-year fast track into becoming a qualified paramedic, or as it's known, an EMT. The course involved placements at various points throughout both years. First, we spent an evening/night in a dispatcher's. I'll never forget some of the calls. For example, a man waking up in bed next to his wife who had died during the night. Next, we were stationed with the patient transport service, taking patients to their hospital appointments when they couldn't get there alone. Finally, after waiting a good 6 months for the opportunity, it was time to spend a prolonged period in placement with the 999 crews. You could choose a couple of preferred locations, and I was fortunate enough to be given the ambulance station close to my home. So I moved back to my parents' home that winter for a full term, leaving my university buddies behind. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't, because it turned out to give me a far less interesting experience. The station was in Buxton, Derbyshire. Google map it. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's also 45 minutes from the nearest hospital, so you better not get hurt up there. Only of course, people often did. One evening, we respond to a call where a guy has come off his bike on the Cat and Fiddle Run. It's named after a pub by the same name on the road, which passes over the Pennine Mountains. Bikers love to bomb it up and down. It's notorious. This guy broke a brick wall with his body, and his legs were over his shoulders. We took him with blue lights to the Affirmation Hospital. I don't think he survived. This is where things got messed up. We turned out of our hospital, traveled maybe half a mile, and got flagged down by a pedestrian. She shouts through the window that somebody has been beaten, badly. We later find out that this was the case of somebody bumping into somebody else at a bar, nothing more. At that exact moment, a guy in a red shirt stumbles out from a side street and collapses onto the road. I had been in the rear passenger seat of the patient compartment, my mentor and her technician riding up front. They get out before me to help him, whilst I open the side bay. Stupidly, I climb out as my mentor helps him in. That's the point when I notice two things. He isn't wearing a red t-shirt. He's topless and saturated head to waist with his own blood. And there's a mob of people heading straight towards us. Maybe 10, 15-ish? Kind of forgot. I'm still outside the ambulance and pretty much froze in terror. I'm only 19 at this point and a total pussy. This was back in 2007. Thankfully, my mentor hauls me inside and locks the door instantly. She then turns to me, asking if the rear door is locked. It isn't. They open it from the outside. My mentor pushes them back and, I couldn't believe it, heckles them, telling them to pick on a group of people, not just one man. She then manages to lock the door. What happens next will stick with me forever, and clearly has as I'm telling this story nearly 10 years on. They begin to try and flip the ambulance. Meanwhile, another guy starts hammering on the side window, shatters it, cuts himself wide open with blood everywhere, but he keeps going. These were animals. There is a window behind the rear and the front cabin. We see a police car approaching. He doesn't stop and continues straight past. Please give UK cops guns. I really don't blame him for not stopping. Only later did I find out that the keys were still in the ignition, but nobody had attempted to enter the cabin through sheer luck. Anyways, crazy, bloodthirsty hooligan mob, let's not meet again. P.S. After this, I finished my course and went off and became an English teacher instead. The number of dead bodies I saw in that time were enough to haunt me for life. To all of you brave service folk, I commend you. Let me preface this event by saying I was 25 or 26 at the time, and I am a 4'10", 100-pound girl. At this time, I was working in a JCPenney store as a floater, which is basically the people that just wander around helping the store when I was needed. On this particular day, I was walking through the men's suit department, which is in the back corner of the store and kind of secluded. It's a low traffic area, so there isn't always an employee posted there, and as I was passing in, I noticed a customer looking around, and so I went up and gave my whole, "Hi, how can I help you?" routine. The guy turns around, and the first thought that flashed into my head was, this dude kind of looks like a lizard. The guy was bald with a high forehead and tiny, really narrow eyes that were too far apart and slightly slanted. Typing this out makes him sound like an alien. He also had a long, thin beard and a braid. He was tall and had a huge belly. He was wearing a t-shirt for some motorcycle club, so that, plus the beard, told me he was just your typical good old hillbilly, Harley-riding redneck. We had a lot of those in my town, and they're mostly harmless. Anyways, I asked if he needed any help, and for a full 30 seconds, he just stared at me, blinking slowly. Finally, he mumbled something I didn't catch, and then angrily said something like,
"What do I have to do to get some service around here?"
I'd just smile and nod. Yes, sir. No, sir. What can I help you with, sir? Kind of thing. He keeps staring at me with his lizard eyes, and I'm starting to get a little weirded out because he won't talk to me. Finally, he says he needs a suit, and he needs to be measured for it. I tell him I'll go get the lady who does it. I know how to do it, but I just don't want to touch this creep. He gets mad and starts yelling that I should know how to do my job and that he wants me specifically to measure him. I say, okay, but I have to get a measuring tape. So he starts yelling that no one in this place can do their job, there's terrible customer service here, etc. He wants me to measure him now. I go up to the register area, allegedly, to get a tape measure, but really just to tell my supervisor we've got a weirdo. When we get back to the suit area, he's gone, or so we think. Through the rest of the day I keep seeing him. He seems to be following me because every time I turn around, he's there, staring at me with his slow blinking lizard eyes. I tell my supervisor, who keeps an eye on him, but the guy doesn't approach me again. He just watches. At the end of my shift, which is 4 p.m., I feel okay about walking in my car alone. It's broad daylight after all, in a busy parking lot. But my supervisor insists on having someone escort me, and thank God that he did. As we approached my car, Lizard Guy drove by us very slowly, staring at me. I waited to make sure he was really gone before I got into my car, because I didn't want him to know which one was mine. And I took a convoluted route home, but I didn't see him. Long story short, I've seen the Lizard Man in the store a couple of times, but he doesn't often approach me. When he does, he's just rude and sort of babbles, never saying anything of consequence. He never buys anything and just wanders around the store, occasionally picking up other employees to creep on. Our manager won't kick him out of the store because he hasn't really done anything wrong, he's just a creeper. So, creepy staring lizard man, please go do your creeping at Sears. Let's not meet. So, I turned 16 exactly 3 weeks ago, but I have this weird habit of rounding up my age months before my birthday, meaning I've been saying I'm 16 for a few months now. I like to spend a lot of my time at the local library. I'm homeschooled with 3 siblings, so it's pretty much the only chance I have to do work in a quiet, neat place. About the beginning of this summer, I noticed some guy was in the library every single time I was. At first, I thought nothing of it, as there are plenty of people I've noticed coming to the library regularly. But one day, I noticed something way off about him. I had finished all my schoolwork for the year and was just dicking around playing games on one of the library computers, when I noticed the same guy sitting 2 computers down from me. I smiled and nodded at him, then continued my game. The internet on my computer started going off all weird, however, so I switched over to the other side of the computer desk and logged onto that one. Lo and behold, creepy guy, who I will refer to just as CG from here on out, switched over to the other side as well, sitting right next to me and staring at my computer screen as if I was blind and wouldn't notice him doing this. I immediately got a pretty bad feeling about this Scoob, and texted my mom to tell her that I'd be stopping by the pharmacy next door to pick up her prescriptions for her, just so I'd have an excuse to leave. Apparently, though, CG wasn't done and followed me outside. He stopped me right outside the library and asked for my name and how old I was. I told him that I am Hamming, which it's my username obviously, and I'm 16 years old. He informs me that his name is Jonathan and he's 46. He then proceeds to tell me that I'm one good-looking 16-year-old and walks away. This dude looks about as stereotypical of a meth user as you can get. Scruffy beard, gel-spiked hair, dirty band t-shirt, and ripped-up cargo shorts. So I just figured he was your run-of-the-mill creep. The next day, I had a writers group meeting at that very same library, so I left my house and started walking to it. I'll spare you the tedious details, but around halfway through my walk, I noticed CG following behind me on a bike. I was creeped out, but I didn't want to seem crazy, and I simply chalked it up to him going the same direction as me. To be sure, I ended up taking 2 right turns, both of which he followed. I was officially bugged out now, so I turned onto our town's main road, which led straight to the library. He followed me the entire 3/4 of a mile there. At some point I don't remember, I pulled out my phone and texted my girlfriend and told her what was going on, and then called her until I got to the meeting. When I got to the meeting, I explained to the group leader what was going on, and she offered to drive me home afterwards. 2 hours later, and we leave to see CG still waiting outside the library, glaring at us all the way to the car. A few weeks went by without a CG encounter, so he was all but forgotten by me until the day he proposed to me. I was walking home from the grocery store with some snacks when I noticed him sitting outside the laundromat I pass on my way home. I groaned internally and decided ignoring him was my best bet until he ran after me. I can't remember word for word what he said, but it went something like this. Hey. How old are you now? I'm still 16. I don't believe you. Now, I have no idea why I didn't just knock him out there and then, but I didn't, and instead I pulled out my student ID and showed it to him. Just for clarification here, yes, I am homeschooled, but you can order student IDs online, and I was enrolled in the K-12 Discovery Program. Anyhow, what he said next is what I'll probably never forget. Oh shit. Well, are you emancipated? That means, are you legally independent of your parents? No. You should get emancipated. Why? Because then you can marry me. I promise I'll take care of you and our kids, and it would be so cute. I booked it out of there, and after a couple more incidents of him following me around, he sorta just dropped off the map. Until back in August when he cornered me in a gas station and demanded to know why I acted so scared around him and to stop doing that. But I haven't heard from him since, but to this day the idea of him just freaks me the fuck out. I'm a female and currently 23, 5'11", and I was probably around 16 at the time of this encounter. I grew up in rural countryside on the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in California with my parents and 7 older siblings. My parents were very religious. My father was a sheriff in the capital city of California, so stranger danger was ingrained into my mind from a very young age. My father would constantly tell me all the horrible things he'd witnessed people do to each other, and he'd give me books written by his colleagues about murderers and the like. So, my story takes place at my family home. First, some necessary background about the layout of my house. My father built our house with his bare hands, a beautiful 3-story Victorian-style house on 2 acres, with a large cement patio and stairs coming down from the front and winding all the way around to the gravel driveway on the side, where we had a big metal gate with a bungee cord for a latch, and an 8-foot-high wired fence around my whole property. Beware of dog signs are posted on the gate, and because all the men in the family are hobbyist mechanics, this is important as it'll come in later, we had about 12 vehicles in our yard at this point. I'm not even kidding. It is also important to note that I was alone at the house with my parents this day. My other sister was gone and all the other siblings had moved out at this point. So in the morning I woke up and put a swimsuit on to go sunbathe in the front yard as I religiously did every morning. After spring came and winter had retreated, I was laying in the front yard scantily clad when both my parents walked by and my dad said, You shouldn't lay out here like that. One of these days someone's gonna try and take you from me. I laughed and told him he was crazy, that no one in their right mind would try anything like that. And him and my mom proceeded to open the gate and leave in the car they had parked in front of it. I flipped over onto my stomach and proceeded to doze off for like a minute until I heard a car approaching at a rather fast speed. I looked up and saw a small green four-door sedan stopped at the end of my parents' road for a good 15 seconds and then proceeded to turn left at the stop sign rather than right towards the main highway. I thought this was a little strange, but our neighborhood makes a loop with 3 others, so I shrugged it off as somebody lost, maybe. I started to doze off again. As I'm laying here with my eyes closed, I could hear slow, steady crunching of gravel. The sound a car makes when they move extremely slow, cautiously, almost as though they would prefer to go unnoticed. I look over and see that same car creeping back up the road towards my house, approaching the stop sign they had immediately turned left at. But the minute I hear the crunching gravel and see it's the same car, I immediately feel a knot in my throat. I knew they were looking at me and nothing else. I knew they were hoping I didn't see them approaching. My heart started pounding, trying to escape my chest, and I watched as they came up to my parents' driveway and passed it, only to park on the lawn next to the road, directly in front of me, with a perfect view of my body sunbathing. Their windows were so tinted I couldn't see anything beyond the wheel. I felt sick to my stomach though, and even though I couldn't see who was in the car, I could feel their eyes burning my whole body more than the sun ever could. I was literally paralyzed with fear. I knew I was home alone, and what were the chances that not 10 minutes before my parents had warned me of creeps just like this? It seemed so real. I laid there for at least 10 minutes, if not longer, before I gained the courage to bolt up to my feet and sprint as fast as I could into the back of the house, through the back door and into the kitchen. I grabbed the largest kitchen knife I could find and grabbed the landline phone, and I peeked through the bay window curtain facing the street. He was still there, waiting, watching for something, probably me. I just watched and clutched the phone, waiting for him to make an advancement before I declared this an emergency and called 911. And then he started his car. I was almost relieved as he started to back up, and right as I thought he was leaving, he pulled into my driveway and parked. I could see his silhouette through his front window. I watched as he got out of his car and approached my gate. He was a normal-looking man, probably 30, with a beer belly and dark brown hair. I started screaming into the palm of my hands. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In broad daylight in a decently populated neighborhood, this man was scoping out the situation, probably trying to figure out how easy it was to get in and maybe wondering if others were home. He stared at the bungee cord for what felt like an eternity, reaching out and kind of fiddled with it. I couldn't believe he would even consider this with how many cars were parked on my house. And for that reason, it made it feel like that much more dangerous. Like he didn't even care if I was alone or not, that he could still have his way. As the boiling hot tears started streaming down my cheeks, he turned around, got back into his car, and left. I went back to God knows where this man came from. He decided it wasn't worth it. I collapsed on the floor, crying, and tried calling my mom over and over again with no answer. Not a minute later, my parents walked through the door, frantically asking me what was wrong as I babbled to them about the man that had just pulled up and stared at me the whole time they were gone. For once in my life, I was so relieved that my parents had come back so quickly from a trip out of the house. The first thing I said to them was, "Did you hire that man to scare me into another sunbathing outside again?" I felt like the timing was too perfect. It was too orchestrated. The look on my mom's face assured me that they would have never done such a thing to me. Needless to say, I never sunbathed in the front yard like that again, and for weeks after this happened, we would drive around the neighborhood looking for that four-door sedan to report to the police, but I never saw it again. I can hardly express the all-knowing fear I felt in that moment. It's what all Let's Not Meet stories share in common. It's something we have wired deep within our primal subconscious depths of our brains, and it's not something we as humans should ever ignore. If you feel like something is very wrong, it probably is. Because I know in my heart that this was not a lost visitor of the neighborhood or some religious missionary that knocking on doors. It was a man staring at an underage girl and wondering how to gain entry into her home and do whatever he felt compelled to do. I can only assume. All I can say is the man who seriously contemplated doing something sinister to me that morning, despite the time of day and the amount of cars in front of my house, please don't ever come back. Because since then, I've learned how to use a gun, and I will show no mercy on your soul. I can only hope I'm the only girl you've ever made feel that kind of fear, but the chances are I'm not. Good evening, all. You may remember me from the bloodthirsty mobs surrounded our ambulance thread. I thought I'd share my other Let's Not Meet experience. It's a doozy, and it's the reason I wanted to become a paramedic in the first place. The night I'm going to talk about was nearly the last night of my life, and I gained a strong belief in fate after that. I have proof of this tale, and it's at the end of this post. Please read first, as it'll set the context and be more worthwhile. It's early August 2004. I'm 17 years old and working a late shift at McDonald's, one of my first part-time jobs. It's a Saturday and my best friend, with whom I just started to go out drinking with, is disappointed because I'm at work. The shift is unusually quiet. At 7 p.m., the manager declares that one of the newbies, myself or some other guy, can go home. It comes down to a coin toss, which I win. I know it sounds dumb, but that coin toss nearly cost me my life. I immediately hop on a bus home, shower, change, and set off to meet my friend. We go to a student union bar outside of Manchester. In 2004, we were still enjoying the golden age of extremely lax ID procedures and easily got into this bar on fake ID cards from the internet. We get a little too drunk. I was so irresponsible at 17, we mixed shots of whiskey, vodka, etc. all into a glass, then downed it. Whilst fucking around on the dance floor, I knocked a guy's drink out of his hand. He started to blow up on me, and I promptly walked away. His friends kicked me in the back as I did so. I later learned that he had been kicked out of the bar for throwing a bottle at my head, which missed me, so I had no idea it even happened. We left the club, which led out into a passage beside the college it was attached to. This passage fed through onto the busiest road running through our town, but it was 2 a.m. and dead quiet. By this point, my buddy had bumped into some old friends from our high school and didn't notice me break away from the group. There was a petrol station directly opposite where we would always get sandwiches for the munchies. At this point, my memory is a blur of what could have been memories or bits of eyewitness accounts that I've constructed into false memories over time. I'll tell it as if I were seeing it now for the purpose of clarity. I was drunk off my face. I walked/jogged towards the garage. A car came from the car park adjoining the passage. It was long, the path, so it easily cleared the car park and got onto the road before I got there. As I stepped out onto the road, this car had, unknown to me, accelerated to 30 miles an hour and struck my right leg as I placed it forward onto the ground. This is incredibly important to the story and my survival. First, about the car. Oh god, how I was lucky that I was dealing with a chump from the club. He had a typical, look at me, modified car with a low bumper. It was nearly touching the pavement. This resulted in my foot being merely scooped up. A regular bumper would have likely buckled and shattered my ankle at this angle, or so I've been told. So, it hits my right leg. I'm in the middle of a stride, and this saves my life. The car instantly snaps both bones in my lower leg, but crucially, it spins me like a coin on its head around the side and not over the bonnet and roof. I break 2 ribs in my right side as I hit the bonnet and puncture a lung too. My right forearm impacts the passenger side window as I'm flipped around the car, UK car layout, and the glass destroys my arm. I later see in the hospital that it was akin to taking an ice cream scoop down to the bone. I bounced off the car and onto the road at this point. My landing couldn't have been any more unlucky. I land on the shattered fragments of window and essentially roll across a lake of glass, shredding my arms. I don't honestly know if I remember this. Writing this story, I get fragments of super realistic memories, but it's like my mind is saying, hell no, and recalling them before I can properly picture them, and it then makes me feel sick. I guess that's regression for you. My best friend at the time called my parents in an ambulance. I spent 14 days in the hospital. Had emergency surgery to repair my leg. Cosmetic surgery on my arm. My leg now contains a titanium bar that's great fun at airports, but apart from some late day tingling, I walk and run normally. I had a fantastic surgeon fix my arm without the need of skin grafts too. You might be wondering, why is this on this subreddit? Well, the driver of the car was, of course, Mr. Bottle Thrower from the club. The whole bunch of people outside the club later gave statements that he had accelerated and swerved intentionally into my path. His girlfriend was riding up front and was covered in my blood. What a lovely bloke. He went to jail, but I don't know how long for. I moved to South England several years later anyways. Speaking of my arm, this is the proof.